Hello, and welcome to another episode of Anomalies. This is a show about things that are lurking in the shadows. This is a show about what's real and what isn't. I'm one of your hosts, Dan Hall, and with me is our usual podcast team, David Jinks.
Hi, Dan.
Dave?
Be with you.
I'm glad to be with you, too. And our newest team member, Sara, Rucker, Thiessen. Sara, glad to see you tonight and have you aboard.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, we have a fourth person with us tonight, and in our policy of trying to get new and interesting guests, we invited someone who I've known for maybe 4 or 5 years, and we'll just call you Isaac.
That works.
Okay.
Yeah, that works.
Isaac is our guest tonight, and the reason we want to have Isaac on the show is that, a little bit of disclosure, Isaac and I were in a ghost hunting group for 5 or so years, and Isaac was designated as one of our lead intuitives or sensitives. So Isaac has some abilities, and I'm not always sure you see him as abilities, but he has some unique skills that we thought would be a little interesting to explore tonight. So that's kind of our topic: intuitives, sensitives, extrasensory perception, and we have someone who has those skills with us. So welcome, Isaac.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Yeah, nice to have you here. So, how would you describe those abilities that you have?
It could be a really long answer to that. I guess the short of it would be I have a sensitivity to residual energy. So this ability that I have is kind of, I'd say, formally known, or maybe informally known. I call it place memory.
Place memory.
Yeah.
So when you go to a particular place, you pick up energies of people who have previously been in that space? Or instances that have happened.
There's a lot of different types of, I guess, hauntings would be kind of what everybody knows, what they refer it to. But I pick up on residual hauntings, which is leftover kind of residual energy that has stayed within the confines of either a structure, a property. It's even been known to kind of linger around furniture and articles of clothing. And so I have a sensitivity to that when I come upon something that has some residual energy around it, then it comes to me in the form of a memory. And to say that it feels like a memory can seem kind of strange, because it does almost have a physical sensation. I can feel when they start to come on, but not physical in the sense of, you can feel yourself touching the top of your hand. It's not quite that extreme, but it does have a feeling that crops up, and it comes via a memory.
Tell us about one of those experiences.
Oh boy, you mean just like an actual
something that you experienced, if you can recall the circumstances and maybe what you felt.
Well, a situation that happened when I was in my early teens is what really kind of set this whole thing, kind of planted it in concrete for me that something was happening. I went over to a friend's house that I had never been to before. It was kind of a new friend, and I went over to their house after school, and we walked into this house, and it was an old house. It was probably around then. It was about 80 or 90 years old, and I walked in, and I was kind of looking around, and they had gone into the kitchen to go do something, and I had started to get these, what I now know, memories of what the house looked like on the inside. And they came back in and asked me what I was doing, and I said, wasn't there a red couch over here in the corner? And his mom was there, and she came around the corner, and she said, well, there was a couch, but that went to the upholsterer. That is not anything that has, it hasn't been here for months. And then I started to get other images in my mind, or actually memories in my mind. And so I just kind of continued this dialogue of wasn't this and this, and who's, and it was before I really understood what was happening. And I didn't necessarily mean to, but I scared her, and I scared him pretty good. And that was an indication to me that maybe I need to start shutting my mouth more until I figure out exactly what this whole thing is about. And that's, that was a big eye-opener for me, that something is going on, because everything that I said to them, and some of the specifics I can't remember now because that was a very long time ago, it all turned out to be true. It was all accurate. And of course I had never been there, and I had never even talked to this friend about any of that. So it took me by surprise as well.
I think it would be difficult to have that first experience and then have kind of a negative reaction to it.
That was. And then try to be, I think I was probably 11 or 12 at that time, and then continue on that, and hey, let's go play video games and eat cookies, or whatever the case was. That was just not going to happen. So,
well, I had this is Dave. I had one of my questions. I've got a bunch of questions laid out here. I think Dan asked about 6 of them at the same time. He's much more
Sorry, Dave.
Stealer
he's much
questions.
more efficient than I am. But one of them, of course, which is what the audience is thinking, what makes you think you're psychic? Well, I mean, using psychic as a general term, I don't know if you think you're psychic. You tell people you're psychic.
No.
What that means exactly, but when did you first know you were different? Is this something that's been with you, these sensations and place memories, as long as you can remember? Did it appear at some point? Did you presume you were normal, in quotes,
right,
and that everyone could do what you did until a specific incident? I don't know if this was the incident here that you're talking about. I assume it was earlier.
Yeah, it was earlier. The place memory, to my recollection, that was kind of the first main place memory event that really it started to make me wonder what was going on and start to question the things that I had experienced before then. But my whole life, I have experienced sensitivities kind of in general. I could pick up on things that were happening around me. I was called, growing up, my parents would always talk to their friends or, brag to people they knew. Isaac is very observant. That was my thing, as I was just a very observant kid. And even as a little guy, I seemed to understand adult stuff. I just kind of understood what was going on and what was being discussed. And there was just instances in my life, and as I was growing up when I was very young, that just kind of threw me off. Like situations that would happen, and how did I know this? How could I relate to somebody who's in their 50s and 60s when I'm 7? How does that even work? And it only I thought I was just kind of weird, but this is normal. This is what everybody does. And then once I got older, I started to when this whole thing started to really poke its head out. And I started to research it and really not only dig into it as a topic, but dig into it inside of myself. I started to think back to all of the things that happened, the experiences that I had when I was a kid, and it started to all fall into place. That these dreams I was having, as it turns out, some of them weren't dreams. They were experiences that I had in the house that I grew up in. These were... the Blue Lady story that is maybe something we can get into. I don't know.
Sounds like something we'd be interested in.
I think we ought to get into the Blue Lady story. That's interesting.
One of the other questions I had was how, and you're kind of getting into that right now, is how do you receive the information? It can be memory. Your memory is like a memory of your own life, right? Yeah. Except you're kind of living receiving the memory of another person or a place in general that's retained something about its structure and positions of items.
That is actually a really good question, because I don't really know where it comes from. I can't pinpoint the area. I can't pinpoint exactly what's happening. All I know is that, and the best way that I can try to explain it to people that I've talked to about this in the past, is that if the 3 of you are sitting here right now and you're all looking at me and you're conscious, and you're very aware of what's happening around you, but if you were to try to envision, say, a family pet when you were little, or your first bicycle or something, it's very easy to still stay conscious and know what's going on around you, but envision that in your head to where you could tell me what color it is. You could tell me what it sounded like, and then from that point you start thinking, about the neighborhood kid you rode around with, and they had a dog, and then there was this time you crashed, and then pretty soon it gets bigger and bigger just with that simple question. And that is what it's like. I still stay very conscious. I know what's happened. Well, most of the time I stay very conscious, and and I can continue going about what I'm doing, but I'm getting these memories as if I'm thinking back on something that I have experienced. So, if I walk into a house, it's kind of the sensation of, have I been here before? Mm-hmm. This seems really familiar, and then the memories start creeping up as if I had actually been there and experienced it.
Sensitives.
Yeah.
Of all types, I think there probably are different types of people who are sensitive to a particular thing. Some people get feelings, some people hear voices, possibly hunches, instincts. I mean, we all call it different variations of it. Some people see auras, different colors mean different things. Mm-hmm. And so it almost seems like your sensory spectrum is just a little bit wider than someone like the rest of us three sitting here probably, and that some of you get some of that bleed over from another frequency almost.
Yeah.
And you have the task of trying to weed out kind of the what's your particular spectrum versus what's present for whatever reason. We don't know where it's coming from, unless you just say the universal consciousness or a field memory or something like that.
Yeah.
That I would imagine has been quite a challenge. It's very confusing too,
very
as you're growing
confusing.
up and why don't my friends have the same issues?
Yeah, very confusing, especially, being a teenager and even into your early 20s. I think a lot of people are still searching for identity. They're still searching, what is it about me that's unique? What is really cool? What do I want to share? What do I not want to share? And this was something, in all honesty, probably the first 28 of my 34 years I've been here, I really haven't shared this with a lot of people. There's been maybe 2 or 3 people that either knew because I told them, or that just by pure accident on my part of just spurting out all this stuff randomly thinking it's normal, that kind of suspected maybe something was
Did your
something going
parents
on.
know?
Yes, when the Blue Lady story that that Dan is so fond of, actually, that came to be. It ends up it turns out that the house that I grew up in had a spirit that lived there, and I have since talked to the owners that live there now, and apparently she's still there. She just doesn't poke her head out as openly as she did when we were living there. So I kind of passively brought these situations up to my mom one day about, hey, have you seen things moving? Have you seen things changing places? If you just happen to see people in the windows, and so she said, yeah, actually, that was strange that you mentioned that, because you're kind of telling me stuff that I've been experiencing that I haven't said to anybody. And so then we got together and then we realized that we were experiencing the same thing. However, as the years that we went on that we lived there, everybody had experienced something. Mm-hmm. But for whatever reason, I was the one who experienced the most, and she would even come and make herself present to me. So there was a couple of times that I actually did see her, which is why we call her the Blue Lady, because she manifested right there, and that was the first.
Was she aware of you, or was she
was?
Okay.
She was. This was actually what's known as an intelligent. I mean, I'm starting to not really like the term haunting, because I think it's getting much like the word psychic. It's becoming this stereotypical thing that is. It's starting to get away from what it actually is. Mm-hmm. So I don't really like the word haunting, but for the sake of this conversation, that would be known more as an intelligent haunting. She was aware that she was there. She was aware that we were there, and she would interact with us. If something, it got to the point when we finished restoring the house, that if we put something somewhere she didn't like it would be physically moved when we would get home. And that happened on more occasions than I probably even remember. So she knew what was happening, and she was okay with us. She was somewhat pleased. Mm-hmm. But
do you have any idea why she didn't move on into an afterlife or someplace else?
I don't. When we moved away from the house, I was 14, And I knew something was up. By that, that was a couple of years after that first experience I had talked about at my friend's house. So I knew something was going on. And I think this spirit and I kind of had this understanding. She made herself present and she made herself known to everybody, but she for whatever reason, like I said, she kind of pinpointed me and made it very obvious to me that she was there. But yeah, I'm still confused, quite honestly. I'm 34 now, and I'm still really confused about the workings of all of this, because I don't understand it any better than you.
Sure.
Than really anybody. Maybe a little bit better than you guys, but that's only because I've done so many hundreds of hours of research on it, and that's all taking somebody else's perspective.
I wonder if, as a culture, we'll ever get to the place where these things are more commonly accepted, where you might even teach about it in school or talk about it at least more openly. I wonder if that day will come. Do you have any thoughts about that?
For people who have these sensitivities, especially kids and teenagers, I hope so. Because I know there's a lot of people out there who do have things like this that keep it, excuse the phrase, but closeted. They keep it in and they keep it to themselves for fear that they're going to be chastised for it. They're going to be shunned, they're going to be kicked out, they're going to be laughed at.
You're lying.
Absolutely, you're crazy. Yeah. And I think that there probably, in fact, I know there have been kids, especially teenagers, where these things happen, and they have been. And so they relate this ability to a negative, they have a negative feeling towards it because of the negative response that they got from the people around them. So I think having it kind of broadcast around and having it known that this really does happen, and that there are people like this, and they're not crazy. They're just, it's kind of like having a little better hearing. It's just they're a little more tuned into that other sense that is less known scientifically and medically. It really, there's not a lot of explanation for it that I've even found.
I think if we studied it more, there would be better explanations, but we've been hesitant to, for all sorts of reasons, to admit. It's ironic because that's an admission that we're greater than in ability than we give ourselves credit for. And that's a kind of a scary thing, because to think that all this time I've been basically had blinders on,
right.
We as a species, and have been missing out on this. But at the same time, it's also a scary thought, because we're so used to the blinders that you take the blinders off, all of a sudden your spectrum gets this big and you're bombarded with extra information. Like Isaac was saying, that it's hard to, unless you have great skill in focusing, and that's what you said in our our pre-interview discussion, that you've been figuring out how to focus better.
Yeah.
To kind of filter out some of the excess, keep yourself where you want to be and not being spread around and having your attention pulled elsewhere. That's not, that would be tough.
It's not an easy task.
We only see some tiny percentage of the electromagnetic spectrum as it is. Imagine if you were open to things that insects can see, the infrared and animals. Dan is a dog lover. He knows your three dogs, they knew things were up that you were totally oblivious to. And you probably didn't want to know, because they're hearing every little cricket chirp outside and every dog down the road barking, and we need to filter that out. But wouldn't it be better to, like Sara said, admit that we're bigger than what we give ourselves credit for?
I like this cultural perspective that you're bringing, Sara, because some of the literature out there would say that if you go back and look at indigenous societies, shamanic societies, Isaac's abilities would not be unusual at all.
Yeah.
But the argument comes, and it's interesting because I know particularly some of Dave's perspectives, when the scientific method came along. It's almost like if you can't prove it through some kind of an experiment, well, it doesn't exist. And so as we became more oriented toward a scientific culture rather than I don't know what the opposite of a non-scientific culture, then we lost those abilities. And now it's almost like we're coming full circle in a way and saying, well, maybe there are things that science can't explain. Maybe the job of science is really to look into that, not to say, oh, it doesn't exist. You know.
Well, science is based a lot on testimonies too, and to just completely leave out the body of, entire disciplines, psychology, parapsychology, of course. It's counseling. You were a counselor for how many years? You're coming to scientific conclusions based on basically testimony, witness testimony. So when Isaac says, I was in a house where I knew there had been a red couch and a TV here and whatever here, there was no way you should have known that.
Right.
The only response from a skeptic is to say it was just a lucky guess.
Right.
And yes, you can have lucky guesses, but when you have a larger body of those observations, you eventually have to rule out just luck, and you have to kind of consider some alternate hypothesis. But also the problem with that is that, like you said, for the first however many years of your life, you didn't broadcast this ability because it's not something you want to advertise, so it's a kind of a chicken and the egg thing. You can't study something that people aren't willing to talk about, but you can't learn about it unless people talk about it.
Yep.
Would you consider talking about some of the investigations that you did with the Olympia Paranormal Research Group, which you and I were a part of, and I'm in particular thinking one that we did not too far from this location that we're sitting in tonight, without telling people.
Right.
Exactly
Absolutely. Yeah.
Sure. Talk about how you use your skills in that investigation.
Well, how about if you could remind, or just bring everybody up to speed on what
Context.
the investigation. Yeah, get them started on it, and then I'll.
So when our ghost hunting group was going on, we had a website where people would not call us, but email us and say, I really got some strange stuff. So this particular case that we're talking about with Isaac was a young man and woman who felt that there was some spirit presence in their house, seeing things out of the corner of their eyes, maybe even like shadow figures. They hear people walking on their floor at night while they were asleep. They had hardwood floors and there wouldn't be anybody there. Their dog, which was a great dog, by the way, Bear, as I recall his name was, he acted a little bit finicky. So they asked us to come out and do an investigation. And we told them that we weren't, I guess it would be better to say we just told them we were an investigative group. We're not going to necessarily do a space clearing or whatever. So once we got into that residence, we found out that there was one room that people tended to be drawn to. And I took it upon myself to conduct I don't know what you call that, kind of an impromptu seance to see if we could get any reaction in that room from spirits, and we got a reaction.
Yeah. And what's interesting about this situation is that event was kind of a classic example of how people who have sensitivities tend to have one very strong sensitivity and then 2 or 3 and 4 or 5 or 6 other kind of weaker, smaller. It's kind of like an artist who's really good in watercolor. But they also dabble in, they still make beautiful pieces in chalk and crayon or, whatever. But they also do pottery, and they happen to play music. They're just a very artistic person. And same kind of thing with people who have sensitivities. It seems to be, from the things that I've read and the other sensitive people that I've had conversations with, that there's more than one thing that they have a sensitivity to. And in this situation, I didn't really get a lot of the typical place memory thing that I typically do. This was a little bit more like the house I grew up in with the blue lady. It was more of I was getting contact from the spirits, and there was 3, right?
As I remember.
Yeah,
right?
I think there were 3 there. I was more being contacted, and then there when the instance Dan is referring to, where he did like a group, was it like a seance? I don't know.
Well, I don't know how to describe it. I just started talking as if there was a spirit there. I wanted to interact with a spirit. So
yeah, and this spirit, this was a bad dude. He somehow got a hold of me, and when I believe it was well, you're the only one we're talking though, aren't you?
I think so.
when Dan said, "Is there something along the lines of, is there anything you wish to communicate?"
Right.
I had this uncontrollable urge to just cuss Dan out. These words were, it was so powerful that I actually had to bite my lip. And another one of our investigators kind of opened her eyes and peeked over at me, and she said my head was red and my lip was white because I was biting my lip down so hard, trying to keep myself from physically saying what this really bad guy was trying to make me say. And that was a very unique situation. It happened a little bit here and there, but this guy was really using me, and that was unlike anything to that point. It wasn't something that I was used to experiencing.
Well, I appreciate your ability to characterize this, the paranormal or whatever abilities you have, as being kind of a continuum, and that somebody has a little bit of this and somebody has a little bit of that.
Yeah.
Because I think that night I thought to myself, we've always thought of Isaac as more of a sensitive, intuitive kind of person, but it was almost like that person was wanting to speak through you.
And that was, and having that happen and not feeling in control that's not something I would wish on anybody, because that's just a really strange, beyond strange experience.
And you never had you ever had anything like that before, where somebody wanted to speak, use your...
Well, I think the Western State thing.
Okay, yeah, that's true. That's true.
Another one of your favorite stories.
Right. Well, we can go there if you want to go, or I don't want to be the only one.
I can't help but think of studies that I've read in psi. I like to call it psi because that seems like a scientific word. It's not laden with, psychic, like Isaac said, is very... You picture people on TV with 1-800 numbers.
Psychic hotline, right.
But psi is just a phenomenon in general that covers remote viewing to psychokinesis and, across the spectrum. That's a term I like to use, but now I forgot where I was going with that. I got so bogged down in the terms. But I wanted to... what I've gotten from the studies that I've looked at is that when you have strong emotion, that's when you get things happening. So I'm just wondering if that's been your experience. I mean, in this case, it sounds like it. You've got a guy who's a spirit, apparently very angry about something. Do you find that, like the Blue Lady, though, that anecdote, there doesn't seem to be any obvious emotional baggage connected to that?
No.
So just in general, what's your feeling about that? Does emotion intensify the psi activity or receptibility?
I think. I mean, that's you're full of good questions, because...
Well, I know that relates to the Western...
Yeah, that relates to the Western state situation. I think so, because I think, like anything, emotion has so much behind it that if there is to be any kind of a residual anything, emotion would be a good platform, because it's hard to be happy, or it's hard to be in a group of people and be laughing and not have it be somewhat kind of contagious, or not have it kind of dominate kind of what's happening, or the other way around, to just be a miserable jerk at a party, and then it just kind of starts to trickle, and pretty soon everybody's like, man, I want to go home. This is,
Yeah, it's kind of a field effect.
Yeah, it really is.
The home field advantage in sports as we sit on the eve of the Super Bowl weekend.
Yeah, go Hawks!
Our Seattle Seahawks are in the Super Bowl again. Yeah. But the home field advantage, it's just, like you said, contagious. It's that, Rupert Sheldrake.
I was going to say morphic fields.
Morphic fields. The more, it's like laying negatives on top of each other, and the more the negatives are similar, the more it reinforces that general form. And again, if you have a whole bunch of people who are hyped up, if in a riot or a crowd or a happy celebration, it does make sense. But I'm just wondering, because you're lucky enough to be an experiencer, and Isaac's kind of rolling his eyes like, lucky or not, and that's one of my other questions, is this, we call it a gift, but it's sort of a double-edged sword. It's a gift and a curse at times. And you mentioned, I just didn't want to skip this part in the pre-interview conversation. You mentioned that when you were younger, you had a period of depression, and I assume it was kind of related to this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, and actually, this will kind of loop around back again to another part of this topic I'd like to talk about. From about my early teens until my late 20s, I had some pretty serious depression. Some of it was kind of brought on. It was situational. You know, my parents got a divorce when I was 14. You know, the youngest of three brothers. You know, my brothers were moving out, going to college. So I kind of had that empty nest syndrome as a 14-year-old. You know, and then trying to get into high school and, you know, being that whole awkward phase. It was just kind of a depressing time for me. And so I kind of dealt with this depression. I was on different kinds of medications and different things throughout my 20s. And when I finally, it was about 28 or 29, I finally realized that this ability that I have, it became to the point where I would just go into a record store, you know, and I'd go hanging out with my buddies, and I would just start having these memories just out of nowhere, and it would start to dominate my time with my friends. And so I really started to realize then that this is a situation that I need to get a firm grasp on. And when I started to get a grasp on it, and I started to research it, and I became comfortable with telling people, hey, I have this thing, you know, by the way, I started to realize that some of these things that have been happening to me could potentially be explained by this hiding, this sheltering of this really intense ability that I have. There's that potential for that. And so I started to dig a little deeper into that. And some of the research that I found is that, and forgive me for not having the numbers, and I can get them if anybody is so interested, but there was a certain percentage, and it was a rather large number of people who claimed, or of teenagers who claimed to be or have these sensitivities, suffer from depression. And they're on medication for depression. And so it's, you know, it goes beyond just, I'm trying to find myself. I'm 14 and I'm trying to find myself. I'm trying to change my music styles that maybe my friends don't like. I'm dyeing my hair 5 different colors. Oh, and by the way, I see dead people. Or, oh, by the way, I know, you know, the winning lottery numbers. Or, you know, whatever the case is. There's just that extra baggage that these kids are really hanging on to, that they can't, there's no venue that they have everywhere else. And so as I started to kind of dig into that, I kind of wondered, you know, I wonder if maybe, I had some stuff going on when I was a kid, but I wonder if it continued into my 20s because of this inability or this unwillingness to release this information that I have and this ability I have. And once I decided, nope, I'm going to do this, I have this ability, and I just need to accept it and tell the world about it. I've got this. The depression went away. I'm no longer on any medications. I was only on one, but, you know, I've tried lots of different types and somewhat differently. But since I was, I'd say 29, maybe 30, the depression went away, and the medication went away, and I haven't had anything. So part of me wonders, you know, as far as kind of the logical, kind of analytical, scientific brain that I try to dig into things, you know, part of me wonders if a large chunk of that really deep depression that I had was a direct result of me swallowing and hiding, holding in this really powerful thing that was part of my daily life.
You were denying who you were?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
No, as a side note, the medications, did you find that maybe it varied between different medications? Did it help or did it amplify? I mean, what was it designed to?
No, actually, the different medication, you know, the different types, every one of them actually just completely muted the ability, almost completely. Yeah. And it made me just kind of an emotional zombie.
I think that's why it's so
horrible.
Prescribed so frequently.
It's
sad to think it's muting your.
Yeah.
It's basically giving that side of you a lobotomy.
It absolutely
that
is.
ability, which is
absolutely
not the way
it
you
is.
want to live your life either.
And it sounds
easier.
It sounds bad because here I'm like, I was on medication and all this, this stuff.
Well,
I was on
it's
one.
not uncommon.
I was on one and at the very lowest dose. And it was still to the point where it just kind of made me an emotional zombie. Which, as it turns out, all I really needed to do was just own up to who I was and what I had, and it went away.
Now, you mentioned something earlier, and Sara can relate to this too. I think is your family artistic? Sarah's an actress. Do you have other artists and performers in your family? Is it something that runs in the family?
Sort of, kind of. More like they like to get together and sing. And I did have an aunt that was an artist. Lots of storytellers, but no. I guess I had an uncle that was a drummer and an aunt that was in some kind of harmonizing type group. But where are you going?
In general, it's not. Well, I was just
thinking. Does it run in the family?
Does it run in the family? And I think Isaac kind of, because it's so normal to him, he kind of glossed over it. Yeah, like my mom, she saw the same things, and I was thinking, well, wait a minute, Mom.
But I wonder
that's not
if
uncommon.
I think I lived in a house that was purported to be haunted back, ouch, I'm having shoulder problems. Back, how many years ago would it have been? I've been out of high school about 40 years. So we'll say 35 years ago, and people had seen ghosts walking through the house, or apparitions, whatever. And I had something touch me once when I was in the shower from the back. But there was no explanation for it, there's no towel there, what was that? And then one night, something called my name. And where am I going with this? Where I'm going is, I don't think I necessarily have any special abilities that are developed. I think anyone in that house, if they were there long enough, would have come across it. Because I think there are hot spots where you don't need extra radar. But
well, that's really interesting because you get conflicting.
What do you think?
And Dan, being the haunting expert in the group, he'll probably
Dan being haunted
himself.
The story that sometimes the activity seems to follow the person, though.
Yeah.
Families will move 20 times or multiple times, and the ghost, again in quotes, will follow them. So it's another chicken and egg question. Is it the spirit, the entity, the soul that's left behind, whatever it is it drawn to a particular family or an individual, and if so, why? Or, as Sara said, maybe you have areas that are just infested and infused with that psychic energy.
Yeah. I want to go back.
And it's probably both, like everything else we talk about.
Yeah.
The answer is probably all of the above, which makes it even more confusing to try to weed out the truth from the fiction.
I want to go back to this cultural thing because that's what interests me. So you've got somebody who's exhibiting behaviors that not everybody else is exhibiting, and you're afraid to talk about those behaviors because you feel that for some reason they might not be accepted. So what does society want to do with that? Well, society might want to say, you got some mental health issue going on, and we're going to give you some medication to deal with that. But in reality, what's happening is maybe you're more normal than most of the rest of the people around you, because you're experiencing true kinds of human original abilities. And instead of honoring that by saying good for you, or let's develop that, or whatever, you're a weirdo. So, and I'm not talking about Isaac being a weirdo, but we're going to give you a medication to tamp out that. And you're a perfect example of somebody who said that maybe was not good for you. It
absolutely wasn't.
Right.
Yeah, and I certainly don't blame anybody for it because I was on board with them. I was straight up, hey, I'm depressed, man. I'm a total bomb to hang out with. I'm just a bummer. This is clearly something going on. Part of these trials and tribulations that I've been through regarding having this ability and then having depression and kind of which, strangely enough, like I said before, they seem to be almost kind of intertwined. I almost feel fortunate for it because it's given me the different perspectives of what it's like to feel bad about yourself, to feel different, to feel like I'm crazy, I'm nuts, this is not normal, to the other spectrum of this is okay. This is not. It might be unique, it might be different, but this isn't crazy. This is something that is. It's that moment that you're bouncing between this is a gift, this is a burden, this is a gift, this is a burden, and you just bounce back and forth. And so I think having the two different, the two different perspectives of being in the pit with depression and then being over it and being done and feeling fantastic about everything has really given me the two different perspectives and everything in between. And I'm kind of grateful for that. So at 34, I'm grateful for that. When I was 24, it was, it was very different. And I really feel for anybody out there, especially the young kids, the teenagers, and even the, people in their 20s that could potentially be going through this change, not only the same change that everybody goes through, but having these really strong abilities that nobody understands and having nowhere to go with it. It's pretty rough. So, yeah.
Well, I think what you can do is to the positive things that you can, because you do have access to more of the spectrum than most of us, maybe you can venture to a place where you get some more answers about the true nature of things.
That'd be fantastic.
That'd be nice, wouldn't it?
That would be.
What what do you suspect exists out there?
Yeah,
that
I'm interested in that too.
That we are not privy to, that we could be privy to. I mean, as far as a general relationship, how things work in the world, the
and
relationship.
We realize this is really speculative, so we don't.
It is, yeah. It really is, and it's my perspective. I mean, just because I have this ability and this thing doesn't mean I'm right, and it doesn't mean that anybody else who have certain abilities. It's all a perspective, because you can only explain what's happening as much as your vocabulary will allow, and as much as the people that you're talking to are willing to absorb it. People who have certain ideas, it doesn't matter what you say, they're not going to believe you, and they move on. But yeah, regarding that's, I don't necessarily know where to start with that, because
well, how about of course I'm going to take us to familiar places, but the Blue Lady.
Right.
Your sense is the Blue Lady was a person who once existed.
Absolutely.
And probably in that house.
Most likely, yes.
Yeah,
and is still there.
And she is still there. She didn't follow. I was, looking back, I'm actually very surprised that she didn't latch on and just go. So clearly her tie was that beautiful home. I don't blame her. I'd still be there too.
So what does that say then? What do you think that says about the afterlife?
My general belief is that we are all here. Okay, it's going to get really weird.
Not for this show.
We're all
we haven't reached that stage.
We are all energy. That is basically my general foundation of what I believe, that we are all energy. Whether you believe in a heaven and a hell and that energy goes up or it goes down, whatever you want to believe, that's cool. I'm not here to tell anybody that what they think or what they believe is wrong. From the things that I have experienced, that I know in my own life, in my own world, the way I see it through my own eyes, there is afterlife. There is something other than this consciousness right now. I don't know how we get there. It may not happen right at death. It may happen 50 years later. It may 100 years later. It may never happen to some people. But it is obvious to me that some people leave this world and somehow, at some point, end up coming back in a certain, I don't even want to go as far as say dimension, because clearly as we'll just use the Blue Lady, she was here. She knew what was going on, so she was part of this. So we do come back somehow, or some of us come back for some reason. Now, was it by choice? I don't know. Was she trapped? Did she go and then say, "Nah, I want to go back"? And so she just came back. I don't know. I don't know that, but I definitely believe that there is something after this something that we experience right now, and it's real. At least from me, from my perspective, it is real, and it is tangible, because there are certain things that happen in this world that we can see and feel and touch and smell. that does give us, they give us that clue. It's just, there's a lot of people out there who just choose, even that it happens to them, they experience it, and they go, no, that conflicts against my religion, it conflicts against my job, what my spouse would think, my friend, and they can talk themselves out of things for whatever reason, whether it's legitimate or not. People are really good at talking themselves out of things, and I think more people experience the things that I experience, probably more so than even I do, and they will never tell anybody. They'll never share it or express what they're going through with anybody. And I understand it, but that certainly puts a damper on people like me who are trying so desperately to bring it to head and make people understand that it's real. So, and I could talk about just that subject for at least another hour, and I won't. I won't.
But I heard something the other day. Did you happen to listen to the Edgar Casey interview on Coast to Coast?
He's interesting, though. Or his ideas.
The sleeping prophet, right? Well, hearing about his life, I realized there's a lot more to him and what he experienced and what he believed and showed than I ever knew before. And one of the topics that came up there was the idea that we have not just one soul, but a dual soul. One is the body soul that is basically assigned to the body. And then the other one is the eternal soul, which goes, at the moment of death, goes beyond back to the universal consciousness or heaven or hell or whatever whatever you believe comes next. But that there is a specific body soul. And I started looking at hauntings and ghosts in that view, thinking, well, maybe there isn't just one soul that's either trapped or goes.
Yeah.
Maybe there is one that is more fundamentally married to the body here.
Sure.
Maybe the Blue Lady is not lost. Maybe she is, staying in this realm because that was her job.
Sure.
Now, why do they become apparent to certain people, and why aren't they all over the place? Because
and that's my question too.
Die.
Yeah.
Why aren't there people
sitting
in every piece of furniture you run across?
Yeah, and that's
be there.
That's my question too. With the fact that I can pick up on some of these things, why isn't it more common? Or why is somebody like me not seeing it everywhere? What is that deciding factor? Why, what is it? And I do that every day of my life. I think what or why, and I've read hundreds upon hundreds and hundreds of articles and books and listened to YouTube recordings and just anything that I can find, and there is no one answer. And that is, for somebody like me who is still, even though I've got this really weird, bizarre kind of ability, most people would think very weird and bizarre, this ability that goes beyond logic, I'm a very analytical, very logical, I put logic into everything that I do. I mean, my job, my marriage, my parenting, I put logic into just common human logic into things. And it works out great. And then when I try to put logic into this, it's unbelievably frustrating. Yeah, absolutely. But that doesn't make it any less real. So it's just this vicious little circle. I'm stuck in the current, of answers and questions that never will probably be answered. Yeah.
This is a question that, maybe based on some stuff you've said, I don't know if you thought about this, but I sense in Isaac, since I've known you, and you're just articulating it, a desire to know yourself and your abilities better. I was thinking about a question that Dave wrote on our pre-show interview, and that's about the use of these abilities. So that's not about you. That might be about what you do with them regarding other people. So do you have a perspective on that? And what the real question I was looking at with Dave here is how your abilities might be used by somebody else in such a way that maybe you don't want them to be used. And I'm thinking of a lot of discussions about remote viewing now. That remote viewing was a way to sense things that people couldn't sense with their five senses, but some of the people who are interested in using remote viewing skills were the military, and they're interested in maybe some uses of that an average person would say, I wouldn't want to do that with that skill. So, two questions: what do you want to do with your abilities, if anything? And then, what about that ability to misuse? Not you misusing your abilities, but having somebody else misuse them.
Is there a self-limiting universal rule, for example? Because Dan was looking at my notes. The CIA and the DIA in the Cold War, of course, they wanted to spy on the Russian installations and spies to see if we could gain the upper hand. Of course, in warfare, that's where all the cool inventions happen.
Sure.
Not for the greatest of intentions, usually. But I wonder, is there a self-limiting mechanism that doesn't let you do bad things, evil things with this type of ability? And of course, the most mundane question that anyone just happening on the subject would ask is, well, why, if he's psychic, why doesn't he just win the lottery?
I get that constantly.
Of course you do. Well, because that's the most
and that's why
base.
That's why I don't use psychic. I'm not psychic. I'm sensitive to energies that already exist. I don't know the winning lottery numbers. If I did, wow. I mean...
You'd have a new house.
That's a
Holy
differentiation
cow.
that you have to make from the beginning.
Absolutely.
Because there's a whole broad spectrum of abilities and sensitivities that you can have.
Yes. Yeah.
Anyway,
that is the very reason why I personally choose not to use the word psychic. Because I can't levitate anything with my brain. I have no Jedi force. I don't... I don't know the winning lottery numbers. I don't know what you guys had for breakfast. I can't...
I don't either.
I can't go through the mic and, try to read somebody's brain waves with tinfoil. I'm not that way. I pick up on energy. Some of it is current energy, like live energy. When I pick up on, somebody's... that's where the intuition kind of kicks in, and I kind of get maybe a little bit empathic, like what you had mentioned before this whole thing started. So some of it's live. Most of it is I pick up on things that happen, and so I'm just getting information that already was, and it's just coming to me, and I'm just relaying it out. So as far as helping people, if I could find a way to use this ability to genuinely help people who are either fearful of something or lost for whatever reason, I would do it in a second. The problem that I have with that is that it's very much kind of unpredictable. There's a certain part of it that I can control, that I can tune in and say, okay, I can get myself grounded, I can get myself centered, I can do some exercises to get myself focused. And I can say, okay, this person is really looking for some kind of answer, and I can do my best to try to tune in to get those answers to come in. It is not a 100% situation. It's not even, sometimes it's not even a 70 or 60%. There's so many different factors that I don't yet understand that it's not just take a key, turn it on, use it, turn it off, and go home kind of a situation. So that makes it really difficult to put myself out there and say, hey, I'm here for anybody who wants help with something. If you're looking for answers from, somebody who's deceased, or if you're, restoring your house and you want to know what the foyer looked like, something crazy and kind of stupid and silly like that, whatever. And I have a hard time with the idea of making a living doing it, which is another reason.
Why is that? Why is that hard?
It's because I blame the media, because the media has all these psychic hotlines or these ghost hunting shows and all these things that some of them might be genuine. I'm afraid that most of them are just junk. It's just crap. It's made up. They found a fad that all these people are into, and they made this big show, and they add the sound effects and the camera angles, and they make this thing, and the show ends, and you saw nothing. You literally, if you pick it apart, you saw no ghost, you heard from no psychic, you saw nothing but a bunch of gimmicky media magic show with cameras and sound. That's all it is. And so to be able to say, well, I'm here to help people, and I'll charge you $10 an hour, or whatever. There's no place for that right now, because it's too criticized. And somebody in my situation, I mean, there may be people who can put a key in and turn it on, use it, and shut it off, and go about their day. I just can't. I don't have that ability yet, and I'm sure not going to charge somebody money to come in and give them information, especially when there might only be a very small portion of it that is even provable. I could come in and talk about somebody's dog. There's a dog that used to live here. Well, are you going to be able to go to the assessor and pick up information, about a dog that lived at this address? No. Come on. All you can do is take my word for it. Am I going to charge you to take my word whether I genuinely felt it or not? No, I'm not. And so these people that decide, well, I'm going to put on some crazy clothes and put a little plate on the table and get an 800 number and charge people for it. No way, man.
Well, now I know Dan was investigating a year or two ago the murder of the... Right? There was a child that was murdered or missing.
Oh, yeah.
Did Isaac help you in that pursuit?
No, I didn't help on that one. And that I specifically said, that sounds great, but I don't have... I mean, I can't promise you anything. Right. I could go, but I'm telling you right now, I promise nothing, because I have no idea if I'm going to get anything. And that wasn't like a threat. It wasn't like an excuse to, I don't want to do it, Dan. So, it wasn't it at all. It was just... this is the reality of my ability. Now, again, some people, they might be dialed in enough.
Well, I don't know if we discussed the Stargate project, right? That's the CIA and the DIA. They had their psychic spies to try to spy on enemies, apparently, but that's where the remote viewing program came from. And when you look at this, I was on the Dictionary or some skeptic.com or something like that. They were talking about the Stargate project, how it was a total total wash. There was nothing that came out of it. They kind of gloss over the fact that the military dumped tens of millions of dollars into it for 2 decades.
Nothing to it, but we spent...
But there was nothing to it, they concluded, after 20 years. But when you read the books of the guys who are actually in there doing it, they say without any equivocation that it was real. There was a small group that were extremely mind-bogglingly accurate, but there was a lot of superfluous stuff that they got up, or it was too vague. It may have been right, but it was too vague to act upon. But that there was a core, and that's generally what you get when you study the psi research that's out there. There's some particularly gifted individuals. As Isaac is saying, there may be people out there who are very accurate, but in general, they must be extremely rare. You're probably a pretty good example of a typical sensitive person, but not a prodigy.
Right.
Who's probably really, goes crazy at an early age, because how can you deal with that in your own mind when you're like, well, of course I can read your mind. Can't you read my mind? How do you live in a world where everyone else is lobotomized essentially compared to you? And that would be rough, but I think there probably are some people, and unfortunately they've been used by the more powerful. In this case, I'm sure that the government probably made full use of them and then disappeared them or something, or locked them away for use in the future. So you kind of become a guinea pig or a lab rat or something like that. So unfortunately, there's no good way for this to end, is the feeling you get, at least in this current culture, as Dan keeps referring back to, and I think that's right. If your cultural bias is such that it's an anomaly, it gets ignored or papered over or whatever.
Yeah. Well, and the other part of
benefit out of it.
The other part of that Stargate project was not only were they trying to figure out information about Soviet, military objects, they admitted that they could kill people with this ability. That they couldn't do that with their own mind, but they could influence people to kill themselves.
That's crazy.
And that, I don't know if you remember this, let's see, what's the guy's name?
Lynn Buchanan.
I cannot remember his last name. But he talked about him being assigned to a case like that where he tried to influence somebody to kill themselves. And he said that this, if I'm getting this right, and I apologize to Mr. Buchanan if I'm not, that this kind of sticks with you. when you don't want it to. Because he said after this case was over, he had a compulsion to kill his own wife. And that was part of the dynamics of what he was trying to influence his target to do. So it's almost like they became psychically locked with each other. So he's trying to influence this guy to kill himself, kill his wife, kind of thing. Of course, not in that order.
Well, he said he essentially downloaded the target's life, or at least some aspect of it. And it kind of sounds like what Isaac is. You're kind of downloading information that's in the database.
It's just there.
The universal consciousness. You can tap into it and have the ability to download information. Now,
it's interesting.
Garbage in, garbage out is the famous computer phrase that if you don't know how to interpret what you pull in, it's not very useful to you. And that's what you've been struggling with for years: is how do I interpret these batches of information? It
absolutely is, and it's trying to explain. I mean, even now, sitting here, and I mean, Dan has heard me talk how many dozens of times to different groups in the classes that he taught and things like that. But even now, trying to explain in depth to really get people to understand what it is and what it feels like is trying to explain the color of the letter 9. You know, I mean, it's
of course Sara, being an artist,
knew that immediately
about that.
But you know, and that's those three things by themselves. Everybody understands. You all know what that is, but you put them together, and there's the train wreck. There's what are you talking about? That doesn't even make sense. Right. But it's hard. It's very, very hard because it makes sense to me, and I can see it, and it's just there are some things that even now, with all of the society that we're in and the technology and the amount of information that we're all available to, or that is available to us, there are still things that go on that I have that there are no words for. That I've looked for words to use that help define the things that I go through, or that that I feel, and they just don't exist. Which is even another whole other strange aspect to think about, that there's no words for things. It's weird.
If there was something that our audience members could be doing, or that we could do as homework if we wanted to become more sensitive to things that we can't see, or energies that are out there, do you have any suggestions for us?
Funny you say that, because the last podcast that you guys did on dreaming, I've always said that I genuinely feel that everybody has an ability. Everybody has maybe not an ability, but a sensitivity. And one of the ways that I think everybody can tap into another sensitivity that they may have is by either meditation or by what you guys were talking about, by dreaming. It's getting rid of your current thoughts, your job, the taxes, the income, the economy, all that stuff that we deal with on a daily basis. Shut everything off. Get your own thoughts out of the way, and get yourself to a meditative state, or to that dream. It was a word where you get yourself to that. It's that dream. It's not a sequence, but what am I trying to say? It's kind of. It's getting yourself to where you're still kind of aware of what's going on, but you are just kind of shut down. Hypnagogic. That sounds cool. Sure. It's
that state. It's like a pre-dream state.
There, yeah.
It's very rare. Personally, when I've had it, because my visualization skills are not very good, and that's the question I was going to ask you as far as some of those measures of how your brain works. Would be interesting to compare you with other people. But in that state, you can think of an object and see it in a crystal clear fashion. You can turn it around. It's a special state that, for some of us, it's hard to do. We all have varying abilities that way. But can you visualize things? Can you, if we just asked you to, close your eyes and picture whatever object, can you see it clearly? Can you turn it around in your mind?
You're talking about like the couch he saw? Would that be an
No,
example?
I'm just talking about your ability to visualize objects.
Sure.
And being a carpenter, right? And a woodworker. Yeah. You can probably see things in your mind and create them.
Yeah,
that's
no problem.
completely normal, and you're like, yeah, it's no problem. But I know there's a scale of
how
well you visualize things, and I'm pretty low on the scale. Just an example, I can't. Yeah. If I try to picture an object, it's fuzzy. It might be black and white. It doesn't turn around. It doesn't do what I want it to do. Huh. But in that hypnagogic, I think, state, that's very different from my normal. Just as a personal perspective on that. I don't know. How about you, Sarah? How's your visualization?
I thought it was poor. I just recently went to a hypnotist. Mm-hmm. Had 2 sessions. I think that I was able to... He has different ways that he can get people to visualize that are, might work for some.
Because there's a range, right? He must be aware that there's a range. I know Dan was talking about his meditation class.
If you said close your eyes or look at your hands, now close your eyes. Do you see your hands? Can you sort of see them when your eyes are closed? Get an image?
If I were to do that, not very well. It'd be like vague.
Yeah, well, it's
lighter images of where my hands.
Yeah, I think that's true for me too. But you can sort of see them, right?
Not for me. I don't know if you're talking about me in general.
I'll work on you, Dave.
Yeah, I think Dan's better. He was talking about his meditation.
Tutoring.
His meditation. But see, I don't think you can teach that. Because Isaac is going, well, of course I can see that. Can you
that's
picture
fascinating
that
you guys
your
are
mind and turn it around?
Fascinating. Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely not, is what I would say. I cannot, in any detail, do that.
I am intrigued with that.
I think you're
blocking.
That
just shows how.
I think you might be blocking. You have a mental block.
No, I think in terms of words and
can you
maybe
teach
descriptors of something.
Can you teach me to pick up a soccer ball with my feet?
I probably
or
could,
hit it with my soccer
probably.
ball. Well, I think we could teach you to visualize.
Probably, but it's very difficult. What I'm saying is it doesn't come natural.
It doesn't.
Again, I keep going back to Dan.
It might take 3 or 4 more podcasts before we can get Dave to do that.
You were talking about your meditation and how your teacher was saying to visualize a flame or some, you had
You're talking
focus.
about the
to
Yoga Nidra class?
Yeah, to get into a meditative state.
Well, and that person doesn't really have your focus. Yeah, that brings some things to things we've already covered. So I go to something called Yoga Nidra. I referred to that in the last podcast. It's a form of yoga. It's about total relaxation. And I don't have to visualize anything. This guy starts talking. He doesn't say visualize a palm tree. He just starts talking.
You just
and I
go into the trance immediately.
Yeah, and I can hear him saying stuff, so it's not like I could be asleep, but I don't hear all of it, kind of a thing. And I wonder to what extent, what triggers that. Is that his voice? Is that my mental state's got to be some connection there? Or is it the yoga loft, the space that I'm in? And that's more relative to some of the things Isaac is talking about. Is there something about that space and the energy work that they do in there that just makes it easier? Because I try the same thing at home to go to sleep, and I'm just staring up the ceiling.
Well, I think there is a lot to say. I'm a believer in feng shui. I think the way that colors affect us have a positive and negative aspect to them. I think the way things are positioned in accordance to the sun, it's very bizarre, and this we may be going completely off topic, but there are certain feelings that I'm assuming you, when I'm pointing at all three of you.
That's why I wanted to go there, because it's so natural to you.
And see that,
and you see things in terms of positioning, shape, relationships to each other, and that may have something to do with your sensitivities.
It could.
Because that's just an innate ability, so it makes sense that you could take it a few steps further, and all of a sudden you're off the scale. You're off the chart, where the rest of us are kind of down here going, well, I have no feeling about anything in this room. Someone could have been murdered in that corner, and I would have no idea that.
So do you? Well, clearly you do. When you walk into the yoga room, do you walk in and you're like, oh, this room has a.
No.
No,
okay. I don't. But see,
Darn it! I was hoping you were going to say yes and be.
I'm just thinking that's a possible explanation because I don't know what the explanation is.
Don't you think that's one of the
on,
most beautiful rooms I've seen in Olympia? When the lights
like,
are
I
on,
don't remember.
I mean, when you walk in, do
Is it a
you
room?
see how beautiful it is in there? Or
Well,
is that?
I don't know. I guess I'm searching for something that maybe isn't there. I don't have a reaction to that space, but I know that what happens in that space, which is not just a combination of the space, it's the other people, because I'm not the only person in there. There's usually 10, 20 other people in there. And then what Doug Adamson's voice is doing. I mean, he's the only one who's talking during that. So I'm trying to actually do an experiment. So which part of this, which variable here is really causing me to feel this way? Is it him? Is it the space? Is it all of it? And it could be all of it. But particularly since Isaac's had some sensitivity to places, I guess I'm thinking about what is there about that place. But I don't sense anything when I walk in there. That's
right.
That's
yeah,
really
I don't
different.
know that I do, but it
You
seems
go in there?
joy. Well, I have been at a wedding there.
Oh,
I've,
okay.
See a beautician lady that has an office right next to it, and sometimes the doors are wide
Oh,
open.
okay.
And I look in, and I'm like, wow, that is such a beautiful room.
But do you feel? I mean, that's a physical description.
I would
You're talking
say
about some kind of
it
vibe.
looks joyous or happy to me,
okay.
but it could just be the lighting and whatnot.
You guys are
I
opening
can
a
see
whole.
Isaac is struggling.
I am just okay. So
because,
let me ask you guys a question.
right.
When you go in to anywhere, it doesn't have to be any place specific. Let me rephrase this. Have you ever gone into either a building, a room, a open field, or whatever, and been able to close your eyes? Why am I setting myself up for this? To be able to close your eyes and feel that the place that you're in is either a good place, a warm place, a bad place, or is it all just I'm standing in a field, I have no idea what you're talking about, or I'm standing in the middle of a room, it's just a room. Have you ever experienced anything like that? You have?
I think
okay.
I would say we went to Wales, and I stood in the various castles there, and there's something about the giant.
Okay.
But again, everyone says it, so that might not be any special.
Well, I'm being kind of vague too. I'm trying to be, I'm.
Do you get a good vibe or a bad vibe? Are you creeped out? Or are you comfortable? Is that sort of what it is? Or
Yeah, but that's only half of it.
Okay.
It's the. Okay, here's the word that doesn't exist.
Right.
It's a classic example. It's a combination of the emotional, physical, color energy of the room that gives you a feeling without the sight, the sound, the smells.
And this would be absent any knowledge about the room, previous knowledge?
Yeah, this is just straight up, you open the door and you walk into a room.
See, last summer I was at the Little Bighorn Battlefield in Montana, and I feel something there. And I'm not really sure, because I know about Custer and I know what happened there.
Right.
But there's a vibe there that it's really hard for me.
Vibe would be Vibe would be a good
word that we might
that would be that would be a closest vibe. Yeah. Okay.
I can almost, and you struggle.
What happened.
Well, yeah, you kind of struggle for this. Well, how do you describe it?
Yeah.
I want to say the energy of the battle's still there, and on a minute level, I pick that up.
Okay. That's okay. Yeah.
Well,
but see, I know about. It's not like I've never been there.
Sure.
I've been there numerous times, and I know the history of it. So, how much of that is influencing what I feel? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know, but I would like to. I would love to have that level of sensitivity. I think it sounds awesome.
But but what you get to some degree is sadness. You get negative emotions.
But you could always leave, right?
Right.
I mean, you don't have to hang around.
Right.
No, you can always leave.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, that's always an option. It's just hopefully when you're in there, something else doesn't realize that you're there, and then follow
Right.
you out,
No.
because that happens,
Oh.
and that's not always.
Well,
Yeah.
I think I'm assuming at least that the matrix that makes up our reality is not biased towards what we call happy or sad or
Right.
positive, negative. It's
Right.
just something that retains
Lighter, heavier energies.
that experience. So it'd be tough to download only the happy stuff, right? And why
Yeah.
would you want? You're basically, you plug in and you get what's there, I would think.
That is exactly, because there are, sometimes I will go into a place and I will get the memories of the Christmases that have happened,
Oh my goodness.
and the reunions and the babies and all the wonderful stuff. And then other times I will go in and some bad things, and some really genuinely horrific things that I wish I didn't remember. I mean, even now I wish I didn't remember the memory that I had.
Because there are people do bad things.
They do.
Everywhere you go,
They
everywhere
do.
you're going to be, there's going to be. Now that was one of the other questions I had. Does your ability seem to vary by time of the day, by year, by mood, by the presence of others? Is there any sort of variable?
Yeah.
Because I know you're an analytical guy.
Yes.
Looking for clues.
Man, am I? And that is, I think that's, yeah.
Have you found any general rules that
kind of,
seem to
sort of,
stick for you?
because as I've experienced in my own life, in my own situations, is that the fall and the winter tend to be more active. Things are clearer for me. They're easier. It's if I go somewhere in the spring and the summer and I get kind of this muddled, the feeling in my chest of there's a little bit of energy here, but it never makes it to the memory and comes out to where I can relay it. I try to come back in fall or winter, because when I do, and if I'm in a good frame of mind, there's not too much regular life crap happening. I have found that if I can come back in fall or winter, that it's much clearer, and that feeling comes back, but then it goes and it continues to evolve, and then I start to get the memories of it. I don't know why. I don't know. I don't have any answers for that. It doesn't even really necessarily have anything to do with what I've read in the past, although when I kind of came to that question, was if I'm feeling like it's more fall and winter, I wonder if there's any validity to that. So I'll go and research it. And there have been things that have been written kind of, by no names, or by, Dr. Schmolo and, whoever and whatever.
I've read his works.
Written in 1949 in, Austria or whatever. That says that, yeah, their research shows that that paranormal experiences happen more in these times.
Well, what I'm thinking about when you're talking about this cyclical nature is the Sabbats of the Wiccan calendar, the solstices.
Yeah.
That's what Halloween is all about. A transition between the death of life and then the rebirth of life in the spring. So maybe there's a natural cycle that explains that.
I kind of think so. I've really done a lot of research on the older traditional holidays. Things like Halloween is very old. Samhain, very old. And there's much more to it than getting dressed up at Halloween and having a Christmas tree at Christmas. There's so much more into it, more involved in it than what we are currently kind of celebrating, what we're aware of. And a lot of it has to do with spirits and energy during certain parts of the year, and and things like bringing Christmas, bringing the green outdoors in while it's horrible and snowy. Oh, and by the way, we're trying to stay away from demons, and we're trying to stay away from all these really negative death. We're trying to avoid all that. So let's bring all the light and the green inside and drink wine and woo, party it up. And party it up. So there's just there's a lot more to the things that we kind of do on a daily or weekly or yearly basis than we're aware of, and I think that kind of ties into this whole there's more to life. There's more to our consciousness than what we are all conscious of, if that makes sense.
Well, I keep thinking we've had near-death experience discussions before, and the thing that strikes me about the consistency in those reports is that the experiencers say that it's indescribable, it's ineffable, I guess is another term for it. There's all sorts of terms for it throughout literature, ancient literature, trying to describe the indescribable, and that's what you consistently hear from these experiencers. They say it was beyond words, it was more real than real. And so if somehow you're tapping into that area, that dimension, that existence that's timeless and not constrained by our three-dimensional rules here, it makes sense that it would feel indescribable.
Yeah.
You can't, how can you describe something that you don't live in actively and you don't experience on your own terms at least? And it's something that's timeless. We're so used to being constrained by time and physical, impediments here. Well, and I find that interesting, that connection there.
It's interesting that you brought up three-dimensional, because another thing that I try to find scientific reason in, as far as a scientific reason for why I have this ability, another thing that I've kind of pondered, I've hypothesized, is that I was born with two-dimensional vision. So I actually don't see three-dimensionally. So the world to me is like a television screen.
Really?
So when instead of having a 3-dimension, knowing my hand is super close to my face, it's not because it's dimensional, it's by size. I know it's about to hit me because the size it was here, the ratio changes. From here to here, it's about to hit me. And so there's that, the idea that, people who lose their sight get this incredible hearing, and they get incredible balance. All of a sudden that their inner ear just goes nuts, and it goes super sensitive, and they have great balance, and they have good hearing, and their touch sensitivity is just crazy good. Part of it is that question of, well, my vision is still, it's still fine. I put my glasses on, I have good clear vision, but it's still impaired compared to somebody who's got three-dimensional vision. So is that impairment? Did that amp up this sensitivity? I don't know. But that's something for somebody like myself who's very analytical and kind of, I'm not very scientific, but I try to find out things.
Sound like it.
I wonder if that is part of the reason that this is amped up a little bit. It's another way for me to see the things around me. I don't know, but it's worth thinking about. It's worth mentioning, maybe.
An adaptation or...
Yeah.
I think, Isaac, you'd be a good resource for us in our conversations. I really am intrigued about, you asked us the question, when we walk into a room or a field, do we sense sort of a vibrational nature of the spot? And I'd like to look into those kinds of things more, do more learning in that area. And
me too.
Yeah. So I think you should come back. How can we tap into the matrix?
Oh.
It is. I mean, if we were
Wow.
a society that valued different perspectives, you have a relatively unique perspective. I mean, just the fact that here we've had revelations, you about us and us about you, that demonstrates how differently, on some levels, we can perceive things. Sure. But also we think on the same level in most ways. Analytically, we can have a conversation. It's not like you can't understand us normal people or us mundane, severely blinded people is how I think about it.
Yeah.
So to have your perspective, new things and revelations can pop out of it just by having a normal conversation. Allowing that to happen. And that makes me ask the question that I've wanted to ask the whole time is, have you had any feelings, any downloads, impressions since we've been here for a couple hours? Has anything leaked in that has made you...
About this space, about us?
Yeah, the space.
Do we want
the future of the show? I mean, are we going to get hits somewhere other than Mongolia? Or?
I see dollar signs, and 6 figures, and
floating. Knowing that you don't see the future, but I mean, just the impressions.
What do you feel about this house? Because you've been in this house before.
I've been here, quite a few times. Lots of times.
Have you felt anything about the previous occupants of the space here? I felt some things.
Oh, have you?
Yeah.
I don't think that I don't think that I have felt anything about this house other than the topic we were talking about, that just the generalized feeling, the vibe, the color, the thing that I can't really explain. Mm-hmm. This is a very lonely place. Again, looking for words.
What do you mean by its isolation here?
No. It feels like if this was in the middle of a subdivision, not the kind that it is, where there's lots of trees and you've got distance, but you could have a neighbor 5 feet this way, that way, in all directions. You could be in the middle of the city. This space feels very lonely. It feels very sad is not the word.
We're all searching for a word. I don't know. Maybe we should ask Dan.
But I'm not getting. It's not you.
It's the space.
This is absolutely the space. This isn't, Dan projecting into this space that.
Because I've wondered about, because sometimes I do feel a sense of loneliness, and I'm wondering to what extent it's this place versus me. Because when I first moved in here, I told Michelle this, that bathroom, I got a really bad vibe from that bathroom. As a matter of fact, I didn't even go and take a shower for the first couple weeks. And I know what the history of this place is. It's just been one rental after another.
Yeah.
I've been the person who's been in here the longest, at 7 years. The average was like 6 months to a year, and then people would move out.
Well, that's okay. Because one of the things that we haven't discussed here yet, but that you know about me, Dan, is that part of the sensitivity I get is it's much more amped up with things that are absorbent. So things that are made of natural materials. So, clothing, cotton, things that are made of wood, things that will anything that would absorb a smell also absorbs energy in the same way, in the same fashion. So in my opinion, that's why things like houses that are built of wood, and they've got furniture and they've got carpet and they've got all this absorbent material. They not only absorb the cigarette smoke or the pipe tobacco or the food that's always cooked or anything like that. It's much more capable of absorbing emotions and energy. So it doesn't, for me, it's very natural that structures, houses specifically, because it's where we do our most intimate of anything, is in our own home, carries more weight. It's much deeper to come into a home than it is to an office building. It doesn't matter if they're both 200 years old. You're always going to get more in a residential than you will in a commercial place, even in a public place. But this place it's got this sense of loneliness. It's got a sense of like a lack of what's the word? Value.
Lack of value.
A lack of value.
Like it's not well cared for. It's not valued. This place is not valued. And I'm not talking about monetary.
No, it's not it's important. Not very important.
Right. Boy, that's really true about how the landlords relate to this place.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They essentially ignore it.
Which
I pay my rent, so they don't.
This is it's a cool little place. It's a fantastic location.
It's really interesting.
It's a cool little place, but I think just those feelings, and this can be that I'm getting from it. I think you being out of this in a different place with a much lighter vibe would probably benefit. I mean,
Yeah,
I think you would just feel better about everything that's happening.
Well, that's
I think
really
that,
interesting, given the pre-interview conversation, which was that Dan is what?
You're going to think about moving
Going to
in.
move out of this place.
Well, there you
move
go.
out of this. What did you call it? Something that would be bleepable.
Yeah, bleepable.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And that actually, I had forgotten about that. That has no bearings on. I've always, even when you had that, that cool little Charlie Brown Christmas tree, and you got your, your things up, and or Amber and I are coming over to just hang out and have a beer or whatever. Yeah. It still has that sense of it's really good to see Dan, and Dan is doing fantastic. But this place is just.
Is it just residue? Could you describe it as
that's
residue?
What I would wonder.
It's thick.
Yeah.
It's kind of a small room, but it still feels like all of our backs are right up against the wall.
Maybe stagnant.
It's just thick. Stagnant is a really good word.
Yeah. I guess I felt that way too.
Really? You've never shared that, though.
Okay.
No, but I just assumed it's a bachelor pad. It's just a little place where you sleep and you spend most of the time out of here, and it's useful. But like Isaac said, outside, it's a nice little. It's like a resort almost.
Yeah.
It's a Sunwood Resort.
Mm-hmm.
I just gave away your location. Oh,
yeah.
well.
I wonder.
Way to go.
I know where we are.
For the remainder of your time here, if the feng shui could be changed a little bit, if there's.
Interestingly enough, Michelle's coming over tomorrow. She sensed that too. She said, "Let's reorient some places in your house."
You should.
And she does that. She does that all the time anyway. You go to her place, it's like, "Hey, I thought that was over here," and she's always changing it. So I think that we're working on that. But that's interesting that you would say that.
Yeah.
And I had that vivid memory, particularly of the bathroom. The first week or so, I didn't feel comfortable in there at all. And I called some of my psychic people, friends up in some of my intuitive friends up in Bellingham, and we talked about that and said, well, hey, the history of that, it's a rental with a lot of turnover. So who's in here, what they did, what they didn't do. Okay.
And I genuinely feel like it's not you. I don't. I mean, if I had that thing where it was like, boy, Dan, you are really weighing this place down, dude. I would tell you because
you would.
we have that friendship, we have that connection. And I would be like, man, look, this is you got it, man.
I felt it. Yeah, I felt it's the other way around.
This is not you doing this to the house. I think it's
the house doing it.
The house is doing it. It's what it is, and I think if you are experiencing anything, I think it's because you're surrounded with it. You're inundated with it.
Well, I think I told you that I experienced some kind of entity here after a ghost investigation in Bellingham. I came back, and that was I don't know if I told you that or not. I don't know if that was before or after the Olympia Paranormal Research Group. But we had gotten snowed in over Thanksgiving up in Linden, Washington, if you know where that is.
I do know where that is.
Yeah, because you got family.
I've got family in Bellingham.
Yeah. Okay, so Sherry Mulholland and Brian Lee and I were in there, and there was something that had followed people from Oregon, and they thought it was some kind of demonic presence. And when we first got to the place, the husband and wife who were experiencing the weird stuff, they had to leave momentarily after they got us oriented. And then Sherry and Brian said, well, we need to we'll go to get us something to eat. So I was essentially left alone in this house by myself, so I didn't think anything of it. I had a EMF meter, and it's one of those kind of EMF meters that beeps. Oh, yeah. So I put it in the bathroom. I walked through the house and didn't really get anything, but put it in the bathroom. Yeah. And then I went to sit in the living room and just, you're sitting there in a house by yourself and there's supposedly something in here. All of a sudden that thing starts beeping. And when that started beeping, the hair on the back of my neck came up, and I found myself calling Sherry and Brian. I said, how long is it going to take to get a burger? I just soon have you guys get back here because I'm feeling a little nervous. And when Sherry came back, she said, Sherry presents herself as a medium. She said the minute I walked into the house, whatever that was, she used the word zoomed her. She felt the same kind of thing. And so I was there for about, I guess a day and a night, and then I had to come back. And about 2 weeks after that, I was washing dishes or something like that, and I felt that same feeling.
So this was recent?
Well, no, that's probably 2 or 3 years. No.
I thought you meant last November.
No. This is actually before. I think it's just when I came back from Bellingham, before I really started the OPRG.
Okay.
But I could say that thing was here. Something, whatever was in that house up in Linden was here. So I don't know.
Yeah. Wow.
I don't know if that's a function of this house or a function of what happened to me up there, or what?
Interesting. Huh. Well.
Have you had experiences with? Well, you're still fairly young, but you're about the age where people you know may have passed away.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You know, family members. Have you
Lots.
had any experience with friends or family members?
Contact with them?
Oh, contact?
Being present in some way, either in feel or physically, or as you did with the Blue Lady.
Not like the Blue Lady. And now, if I could go back in time at the ripe old age of, I think I was 10 or 11, and rename the Blue Lady, I would rename her something a little less
why was she the Blue Lady
stereotypical.
anyway?
She had a very pale, whitish blue aura. She was. I mean, you could see her lips from her skin and her,
So
everything
she
else,
really
and she
was
had a
blue.
patterned dress, but she had this
Ish.
blue. She was blue, which is a whole other. Why? If you come
I'm not
back,
sure if she had a blue dress, or
well,
she was literally
she had a blue dress
Blue-ish.
and a blue hat and her, but it was all a shade of blue, light blues. Yeah. So why do we come back in weird colors? Why can't we just?
So is that an aura? I mean.
But she was very visible, though. I mean, I could draw what she
Right.
looks like, and
How old was she?
I would have to say between 19 and maybe 22, 23. Real young.
I think we were all picturing
Yeah, older.
probably.
No, because of the lady thing. No, she was young.
Compared
She's
to
very
you,
young.
she was older, right?
Well,
At the time,
at 10 or 11 or however old I was, she was, yeah.
Well, now talk about Isaac's ability to visualize. I'm going to tell that story about us at the Pioneer Cemetery in Ruddle.
Yeah.
And we had done an investigation of that cemetery, and there were some weird EVPs that somebody had picked up, and so we were there to kind of check that out. And as we got ready to go, everybody started going their separate ways, and we said our goodbyes. Isaac relates later to us. They said, well, I feel like we're leaving somebody behind. And so he went mental checklist of who's in the group. Well, no, they all left. So you figure out that there's a person there that's trying to tell you that she's being left behind.
Yeah.
And you drew, I've still got that picture somewhere on a
Do you
slide.
really?
On a slide.
That's a horrible drawing.
No, but that's the point. He was able to visualize that person, and the person looks like they're dressed in not contemporary clothing.
Right.
So you seem to think that was someone in a spirit, somehow attached to that graveyard that
Yeah.
was trying to latch onto you.
And I think she did. I think I don't think she made it all the way home with us, but I think she made it real close, because there was a couple of times that I had to fight the desire to turn around and go back, because I just knew we had left somebody behind. And it was her. And I haven't gone back there. And that's another, just like with the other place, I want to go back just to see if, just to see.
She or anybody else would manifest themselves. Yeah.
What was the question you had asked? I actually, we started to talk about it, but then we didn't.
Had you had any sense
Contact
of somebody that was closer to you?
Oh, that's right.
Communicate either feelings or, obviously a sighting.
No
For
sighting.
lack of a better term.
No sighting, which is interesting. Because if I'm getting all these randoms, why couldn't I get people who are close to me?
Right.
But on the flip side of that, I've had, and as we were talking about earlier with your last podcast with dreams, I've had a lot of dreams of my family talking to me. Some of it I can't remember. Some of it I can. So communicating with me that felt very, very real. But they were while I was asleep. So there's like a whole other thing. If I have this ability that is so kind of sensitive and so I don't want to call it strong, but I mean, it's there, it exists, then why hasn't my grandmother, who by the way, my grandmother did have those abilities. She had different kind of abilities. But my mom and her siblings all knew it growing up too. They all knew that Grandma had some stuff going on. And then it skipped. My mom doesn't. Neither does my dad. My mom only knew about the Blue Lady because she saw stuff. She saw things. But then it skipped, and then it landed with me. So my grandmother did. So why haven't I? I don't know. Maybe it's because they decided to move on and stay. Maybe I can't tap into that specific area of which they're currently at. Maybe they don't want to. Maybe they're looking like, God, that poor kid's got enough going on. I don't want to go and, show my face and then scare him. Or, who knows? I don't know.
The other thing I always tell Dan about, going back to near-death experiences, very, very common report that when people die, at the moment they look back at their body, they couldn't care any less. It's very common. It's like they shed a costume, and it's like, I'm done with that.
Wow.
When we're here, everything seems so important.
Important,
And, I mean, we have some pretty intense experiences. If you go through tragedies and whatever, of course it's important. But yet, when you move to that next realm, that's an extremely common. I shed my skin. I couldn't wait to get out of there. I saw my kids crying, but it was like, they'll survive.
They'll live. No pun intended.
I'm out of here.
Yeah.
And
that's interesting.
it makes you wonder why there might be some residues of that. Who would stick around and who would go on? I mean, it kind of answers the question: how come my dead grandmother, didn't she love me? Doesn't she? Why won't she contact me? It's because either she doesn't care, which is not really the right way to put it. I think it's just that we're going to be okay here, and that's the general feeling there, wherever there is.
Yeah.
So maybe it isn't important for the afterworld to come back and contact here, except in a few cases, though. In some cases it is, and that's what's so baffling.
Well, and, I don't necessarily need that to happen. And maybe that's known. Maybe they understand that would be really cool. I would love to see members of my family.
Yeah.
But it's not necessary. It's not like that is going to be the validation. So why?
And there's the whole prime directive thing. Don't interfere,
Sure.
or else you'll change the plan, the project.
Sure.
The scientist Jane Goodall doesn't jump into the middle of her primate study and say, "Hey, how you doing? I'm
What, a candy bar?"
Because you just screwed up the whole experiment, the whole 30-year experiment. And with humans, it's a whole million-year experience or whatever experiment, I guess. I mean, that makes the most sense to me. So that may explain. But another question is, have you had lucid dreams? Have you been able to control to the point where you're in the dream going, okay, this is a dream.
Yes.
I know now.
Yes, I have. Not often. It hasn't happened.
They're pretty rare. Yeah.
It hasn't happened very often. Maybe 3 times, maybe 2 times that I could say it would. It was, I had absolute control of it. I could just say, I am dreaming. Fantastic.
Because I would like to see
what am I gonna
your
do?
mind in action in a lucid dream. I think that you could probably do some damage there.
Well,
you could
and
make some
what's really funny is I remember
connections.
what you were saying about about you flying. And you just open the slider door and there was the cliff and you just and you just jumped. I'm remembering from the one that really stands out is in this dream I went back to the house that I grew up in where the Blue Lady is, and I jumped from the top of the house and I flew over the bay. And what I was doing is I just flew around, this close to the water. Well, this is okay. So a foot from the water level, and I just flew, and I could feel the wind. I could feel when I got a little close to the water, I could feel it splashing. I could pick my direction. It was amazing. And I remember waking up very, very specifically. When I woke up, I was exhausted. I felt like I hadn't slept the entire night.
See, that's what I was trying to convey to these guys who go, "What's it like? What's so great about it?"
It was very
it's
real.
So real.
Yeah, it was very real. And I remember being a little bit confused. Like I knew that I was dreaming, and this is a dream, and okay, cool, I'm going to take advantage of this. And then when I woke up, I was like, okay, I woke up, but there was still that moment of, what the hell am I doing here? I was was just there.
Yeah,
and I was
it seemed
absolutely
really
exhausted.
real.
Yeah.
So I wonder
Yeah.
if you could go back and visit the Blue Lady, which brings up the other question. Have you
Maybe.
had the ability to go back to your...
I have. I've gone back to the house, and I know the people who currently own it, and I didn't relate to them that, hey, I've got this thing, and there's this woman here. I just kind of sidestepped, and I said, so, have you guys experienced anything? Have you seen anything? Oh, yeah, things are moving all the time, and they brought out this sheet of paper. She had to go find it. It was in a book somewhere, and she pulled it out, and they had taken notes.
Oh, like a journal level.
About just random things that happened. And I said, well, did you see anything? And they haven't seen anything. And they also they raised 2 kids in the house, and they're gone and moved out. And the kids never saw anything. But they continued to have things moved. And one of the things I remember the wife saying is that, and I don't remember exactly what it was, but they got this thing, they brought it home, and they put it somewhere, and it was either they left and came back the next day, or later the day, or went to bed and came up, woke up, and it was moved to a certain spot. And they thought, well, I get there, so they moved it back, and it did it like 3 times, and they finally just left it there, and it's stayed there ever since. So apparently, she just wanted it there. So, and I just told them that we had experienced something as well. I didn't go into detail about any of it.
Wouldn't it be cool to go in, this is just my perspective, cool to go into that house and try to contact the Blue Lady?
I would love it. Yeah. Because I really do feel, and this sounds nuts, but I feel like there was this mutual connection between this now girl, I mean, she's way younger than I am now, this girl and I. Like, either she knew that I could, that I was sensitive, I could know that she was there on other levels that other people didn't. I don't know. But there was definitely this connection that we had, and she made me understand that it was okay. It was no big deal, and she was pleased with what was going on. So.
And it's interesting, she wanted things in certain places.
Right.
Especially in light of what you're talking about.
Right.
Feng shui and...
Right. And she was okay with us restoring the house and completely annihilating the interior and bringing it back together. She was okay with it. But that vase had better not move. I put that vase there for a purpose.
Yeah.
Don't move it. So, yeah, very, very interesting. And I wish that I had explanations for it. I wish I had pictures or videos. All I have are my own accounts and my accounts of my family. And regardless of if I can turn those in for evidence or not, they're real. And it really happened. It's absolutely legitimate, and there's no doubt in my mind about it. So,
thanks for being here, Isaac. Thanks for sharing.
Thank you. Cool. This was fun.
We hope you come back
again too. We'll keep you in mind for all the other related subjects that come up on our rather bizarre show. But that's what keeps it interesting.
Well, thank you for having me. This was fun.
Yeah.
See you next time.